Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here with all of you and to have this opportunity to share with you some information that I hope you might find meaningful in your own life's journey. Um, Before we continue, I would like to offer some learning objectives that I hope will be met by my presentation today. Um, and I just also want to thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it very much. Um, so the objectives that I'm hoping to provide and offer today is there are four objectives. Um, to have a deeper understanding of migration mental health, I will provide a personal example that relates to the Ulysses syndrome. So it is an example from my own personal life to explain um, my own understanding of this. And my second objective is to define home and belonging. The third objective is to examine the significance of attitude in Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. We will talk about logotherapy, the definition, finding meaning and purpose, and taking responsibility for decisions. Um, and the fourth one is to examine Frankl's definition of avoidable and unavoidable suffering, and the pillars of logotherapy, which are freedom and responsibility. He says that we are always free to take responsibility, but we are never free from taking responsibility. So let's begin. So Frankl says that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So we have the freedom to choose. So our first objective is to have a deeper understanding of the migration mental health. So let me share with you my personal journey to explain this. I would like to share my personal experience in order to reference my opinions, my claims, and the significant impact on an individual, as well as collective mental health challenges that are consequences of such circumstances. I and my family, as are many others, immigrants to Canada. Many of my immediate family migrated to North America, some went to Australia, and many of my community and family returned to their original homes, which were mainly in the UK, England, Ireland, Scotland, as well as to Portugal and Spain. There are very few who remained and still remain in that particular country due to complicated economical and political circumstances and continue to be persecuted, experiencing religious and cultural discrimination. Now, I will not be mentioning the country because this is not intended to discuss any one particular country, its population or its political situation. Instead, this example, this presentation is meant simply to share migrant or immigrant experiences that are common to all migrants and immigrants. Some of these common elements that we share, I believe, are being forced or compelled to leave a place which has been established in your mind as and heart as home. Regardless of whether members of that community are indigenous to the land or people who have come over and settled for one or many generations. The other common element are the experiences of mental health issues when compelled to migrate, when you are forced to migrate, when you are forced to leave your place that you call home, such as depression, anxiety, a sense of annihilation, isolation, loss of security and belonging. And of course, regardless of the negative circumstances, there is loss and grieving and the hope of ideals that may someday have come to be realized. From the main topics related to migration and mental health chosen for this conference, I have chosen to speak on stressors and clinical manifestations found in those who have experienced the need to migrate from the place they have called home. Frankl says when we are no longer able to change the situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So when we cannot change a situation, then we are challenged by life to change ourselves. He says that forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess, except one thing, your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation. My story then begins about 3 generations before I was born. Through those generations, my people experienced many complex traumas relating to the need to migrate. The various traumas that followed through those generations to impact me and my family's lives. My ancestors, along with many, many others, had arrived in this particular country, for political reasons in the 17th century. And they established a community here. However, most of them were hoping that they can return to their original homes whenever it was possible to do so. From my mother's side, her ancestors migrated mainly from the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and some of them came from France and Spain and Portugal. From my father's side, his ancestors came from Spain, although there were a few from Portugal and France. In my family, as with families in other parts of our community, people married among the community, outside and inside the community. However, there were many individuals that lived outside the community, uh, besides the ones living inside, and married people from the native community. Most families experienced diverse network of collaboration within and outside of the community of original migrants to that country. About 50 or so years following the establishment of the migrant communities that my family belonged to, along with the native communities that were there already, there was a great war. When that particular country, won back its independence and they set out to expel all of those people with any affiliation, with any connection to those who were associated with the original people that came over. And this was part of colonization and the colonization process, and people, or just people who wanted to migrate to that country. Most people of our community left very quickly. And this was in the 1930s, 1940s, because there was a threat of war. And it began in the 30s, in the 1930s. People continued to leave during as well as after the war. An important note is that the greatest tragedies, though, occurred within the inter-subcontinental people. The war was among the natives of that land. They fought each other to gain a portion of it for their own respective people, for that religion, and for their traditions and culture. The community of non-natives that my family and I belong to were involved in the political release of their hold on any part of that land. But we also were expelled. So we were thrown out, or we were asked to leave. We were made to leave. So we were compelled once again to leave a place that we had established and decided that was our home. This land was split in two for the respective native people, and migration from one area to the other began within this split land, and people en masse started creating started to leave, and this created complex psychological, physical, spiritual, political, and economical trauma that was of an extremely violent nature for the natives who had occupied that land for many centuries. The non-natives who were forced to leave, also en masse, in big numbers as well, experienced similar trauma. After the war, there were still large numbers of my community who had been left behind. One of the main reasons originally was because they missed the deadline to get on the transportation, the ships that were leaving and were taking us back to our original countries. We missed that. We missed the deadline. And of course, it was all connected to the psychological and emotional experiences that people were experiencing, the trauma that we were experiencing. There were others who stayed due to complexities of reasons, many, many reasons, as was the case with my immediate family. Many people had left, all of my family had left, my big family, except for my immediate family. We remained, but we were homeless or chose other places to migrate, looking for safety and escape. There was not only family trauma that was made worse by grief and loss, but also confusion, depression, and anxieties. There was a sense of loss of identity, home, and belonging. There were deep fears surrounding the choices between that of the unknown that would meet them or meet us when they left, even though they would be among their own cultures and religion. A key impact in many cases was that the intermarriages that had occurred over the three generations had produced many offsprings that physically did not look like the original people. So there was more prejudice, there was more discrimination, and there was more trauma. The discrimination that was experienced in this section of my community members was twofold. On the one hand, they did not belong to the country that they had made home and were rejected due to their connection with their original countries, the ancestry, the skin color, the language, the lifestyle, the culture, the traditions, and religion in these instances, which were constant. There was continuous and open persecution, threats to our day-to-day life, jobs, economics, finances. There were inequalities. There was a risk of violence and abuse of at many levels and in every manner. Secondly, they were rejected by their countries of origin due to where they were returning from. And for many of the people in my community, many of my family members included, it was their physical and non-appearance, such as religion, tradition, language, and skin color, that brought prejudices and discrimination at many levels. The effect of this prejudice and discrimination was manifested in mental health symptoms, such as depression and anxiety, a sense of loss of identity, isolation, fear of annihilation, further family and relationship traumas, interfamilial discrimination. So within the families as well, there was discrimination because of skin color and culture and tradition, and abuse and even suicide. So my family was no different. There was a general sense of isolation and of not belonging anywhere. Our very identities were in question and brought upon a sense of deep shame and embarrassment, guilt and loss of who we were. The sense of loss of identity went so far as to even taking on the opinions of those who were in power. They were telling us how and what we should think and who we should be. Due to the psychological abuse and a sense of powerlessness, there was a general acceptance of these opinions in order to try to avoid discrimination and persecution. It was a survival strategy. My father suffered a great deal, more than anyone I know. He and his family had never embraced any part of the language and culture of that particular country. He was a brilliant engineer who did very well while working with the English-speaking community of foreigners and organizations that were helping to rebuild that country after the war. However, there came a time when this came to an end, and so does my father's physical and mental health. He did not speak the native language except for a few words. We as a family did not follow any of those traditions and cultural norms. And like many others, we were shunned to the fringes of that society. If it was not for my dear mother, we would probably have perished. My mother, on the other hand, was a brilliant linguist, which means she had a talent for speaking many languages and also the native languages and dialect. She was a teacher in the community and she was able to communicate. It is very important to note here, and you will understand, I'm sure, that the significance of language in migrating and mental health and isolation cannot be underestimated. Language is so important because it is the one primary way that we communicate with other people when we are traveling to different places. So, due to her intellect and cunning, we came to have a measure of safety from persecution and came to live once more, even though it was very briefly, among a community of people that lived around a project that my father was working on and managed, and we were safe for a little while. My father had been able to work for a few years in Canada when we came to Canada a number of decades ago, but his depression became worse as time went on, along with the problem with his speech and speaking in general. So he has almost lost his ability to speak as he has got older. Like countries, migrants, we did not have the knowledge at the time of mental health and interventions as we do today. Later on in his life, we discovered that he had undiagnosed autism, mild autism. He was a high functioning autistic individual, which explained his being exceptionally good at his work. So he was accepted and respected. My mother became the main financial supporter of our family and worked long hours. However, she paid a heavy price with her physical as well as emotional health. There were many historical and generational family traumas that were passed down to us. And they were unexamined and poorly managed loss and grief. So each one of us, five siblings, we are five in my family, five siblings, we have suffered emotionally. However, fortunately, due to the resilience that we were able to build in a country we now embrace as home, we refound family that we could bond with. We had supportive friends, good education, and learned how to navigate the complexities of the place where we now call home. We were able to find resources to support our progress and achievement. Although we faced in the beginning many discriminations at many levels, we had the same language and we were able to communicate. And eventually, we were able to integrate and learn how to belong. Our day to day life started to take meaningful shape, and we were regularly reminded of the meaning of our lives, individually as well as a family, and the purpose of our struggles and challenges. Although we can only appreciate our struggles, challenges, and suffering now that we look back, we can see clearly that progress happened gradually. We experienced much suffering at each stage, but now we know that it was a meaningful process and realize the extent of our blessings and its worth as we gained many worthy achievements. Both my parents have been examples of resilience and hard work, ambition and discipline. There was little time in the beginning for meaningless activities, so every moment of the day was spent trying to build a life. There are countless immigrants who have shown this resilience and have rebuilt their families, as many immigrants have, in large measure, also participated and collaborated in rebuilding countries and communities due to their strength of integrity, hard work, ethic, and their commitment to their family success. Even in the face of tragedy, you will find commitment and discipline and ambition. There are just as countless stories to evidence this on a global scale At the same time, there are also as many migrants, individuals, and families who have not been able to find any meaning in their progress due to deep and perpetuated mental health problems, a lack of opportunities, support, education, family, and friend connections. These are individuals who have suffered deep and deeper mental health problems made worse by their circumstances as migrants, language barriers, loss of identity, loss of stability, security, and a sense of belonging, grief, guilt, shame, isolation, among loss of other life elements, and would support mental health progress.
Dr. Doreen, you have 3 minutes left to finish the presentation. Thank you very much for the study. Dr. First point out some questions. Please, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, don't hesitate.
So when I consider my own story and that of countless others seeking home, security, and belonging, I can comprehend how survival is innate, it's instinctual, because life does have meaning, and that each one of us has a part to play. We have the ability to respond in meaningful ways as life challenges us. The survival mechanism and the most reliable tool in our logotherapeutic medicine chest. Then is our innate and primary motivation to search for meaning. The second objective is addressing home and belonging. I have come to realize as I deal with my own personal losses and tragedies and endeavor to comprehend my own life's journey, the meaning and purpose of my life, I realize that they are tasks that I have avoided due to fear, insecurity, and perhaps at times apathy, but is triggered by past trauma. This comes full circle back to fear of rejection, abandonment, and trust. The primary lesson in that, although we set up and create physical places that we call home, what is important is what is within this space and is actually what is meant by home. A home is where we find a sense of belonging, a sense of being valued, feeling worthy of being loved, and a sense of safety. Home has positive connections as well as negative connotations. So whether home is positive or negative, it can be considered on a continuum. Home is as unique as each individual. It can therefore be appreciated what a migrant may experience emotionally, spiritually, and physically when having to leave a place where they have established a sense of belonging. So in examining the significance of attitude, although we are not always in control of the conditions or situations that confront us, we can choose how we respond through our choice of attitude, thus building courage and resilience to resist the temptation of becoming and remaining victims and prisoners of our thoughts, and choose this freedom no matter what life throws at us. We begin to think about attitude by examining the deeper dimensions of spirituality, self-transcendence, and our sense of meaning, purpose, and our ability to respond to life's questions. Logotherapy is based on the assumption that although we may have an instinct to survive, we also have an instinct and an intrinsic need for our lives to have meaning and purpose. We discover that no matter what life throws at us, there is always meaning to our existence. Logotherapy is an action-oriented practice with the philosophy based on the idea that we are strongly motivated to live purposefully and meaningfully. And we find meaning in life as a result, knowing that we are free to take responsibility and not free from responsibility. So once again, Frankl states that mental health is based on a certain degree of tension, the tension between what you are and what you can be. He says the gap between what one is and what one should be, that tension is necessary to be able to build resilience and strength. When we are challenged to grow, to reach our true potential, our will to meaning is awakened. And in conclusion, Frankl says that what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him. For us migrants, this is a vital learning. We learn this in the avoidable as well as the unavoidable sufferings of our respective circumstances, and are compelled to answer life's questions, to ask, what is the meaning of the situation? And what is my purpose? One way or another, we find meaning, whether we comprehend it as we set out on our journey or when our journey is completed. Thank you very much.